I was mopping tile in a billionaire's kitchen at 10 in the morning when I did the one thing you are not supposed to do in a room that expensive. I pressed play, a little Bluetooth speaker humming low, so the floor could feel it, not loud, just warm, and two little boys, born deaf, sat there like winter with spoons in their hands until the bass ran up the legs of their chairs and into their bones, and something in the house cracked open. That was Seabrook House on the Oregon coast, glass and cedar, and silence, the kind of place magazines drool over, and people like me roll our eyes at. Because who lives like that? But I lived there by contract and paycheck and grit, hired to clean and keep order. And my name is Imani Brooks, a girl who grew up where music was a utility bill and laughter traveled through walls. The owner was Marcus Hale, suits like armor grief folded so neat you almost believed him when he said he preferred quiet. And his wife Elena died the day the twins were born, Leo and Max, soft-cheeked and shut to the world, in ways that made strangers speak slow and nod like life was a waiting room. Therapists came and went, charts were drawn, routines were worshipped. Joy never got an invite, and for 2 weeks I followed all the rules until I couldn't. So I swayed in that kitchen the way my aunties did at backyard parties, big and silly. So the rhythm is visible if your ears don't catch it, hands carving the beat in the air, chair legs knocking the tile in time, because if the body won't listen, maybe the floor will. And Leo looked up like a bird catching a thermal. Max tapped his heel once, then twice, then 3 times, and I laughed to hide the ache blooming under my ribs, because when a house that rich finally makes a sound that isn't machinery, you feel it like weather. We made a triangle, 2 toddlers and a woman with a dish towel, moving side to side, knees, soft weight shifting, so the pulse travels up from the soles, and the first giggle that came out of Leo was thin, like a screen door squeak, but it was a siren to me, you know what I mean? And right then the doorway filled with a shadow, and a file slipped from a tidy hand and fluttered like snow on tile, and Marcus froze, not at me, not at the speaker, but at the sight of his sons alive in a way he hadn't let himself imagine since blood and sirens and funeral shoes. And he didn't yell, he didn't have to, he left behind a silence so sharp we could have shaved with it. Next morning he came in like a storm cloud, ironed flat, Miss Brooks. What exactly do you think you are doing with my children, every syllable legal? And I wiped my hands and said the truest thing I had, giving them joy. And his mouth did that tight thing people do when a word makes them itch. They need structure, he said. Therapy, predictable inputs. What happened yesterday was not treatment. It was reckless, and I told him. Reckless is just a rich man's word for something you can't control, and if you stood where I'm standing, you'd see 2 boys who are starving, not for another chart, but for a reason to reach back. And the air snapped between us, 2 stubborn people and a table full of blocks. And I went back to slicing fruit with hands shaking just enough to make the strawberries look artistic. And I thought, yeah, that happened. So I turned chores into stages. Socks became puppets, with ridiculous voices sweeping, turned into a foot race that ended in a pile of limbs on the living room rug. Bubbles floated like cheap balloons and popped under tiny palms, while I pretended to be scandalized, and the twins started trailing me like ducklings, not clingy, just ready faces doing all the signing. Their fingers didn't know yet. Sometimes I caught Marcus standing in a hallway, pretending to read something on his phone, and I would clap too big and laugh too loud, so the house learned there was no penalty for being alive. Late one night, I found a photo frame with dust thick enough to write a prayer in younger Marcus, with sun on his face, and Elena with that kind of smile that makes you feel like you're about to be chosen for something. And I didn't hold a ceremony. I just put it at kid height, where truth belongs. And the next morning Leo froze like he heard a name he didn't know he knew, tapped the glass, looked at me, then at Max, and tried to shape the sign for Mom. I'd been practicing in secret, imperfect and perfect at the same time. And Marcus walked in, and his knees gave a little, and he said, voice sanded thin by years of crying, "Yes, boys, that's your mom." And he touched the frame like skin, and the house let out a breath. I swear it had been holding since the day everything went wrong. I stayed up late, with a notebook drawing arrows, and hands writing the same word 100 times, until my own bones remembered it, and the day I sat on the carpet and signed play then. Happy, then Love, the twins, leaned forward, like I had pulled candy from thin air. Their fingers fumbled. Their faces worked each tiny motion, landing like a drum, and Marcus hovered at the doorway, then sat on the edge of the rug like he was afraid to break the floor with his weight. And I said, "Try one word, just one, nobody's grading you." And his hands shook, and he signed, "Dad, imperfect and brave," and both boys lit up like porch lights. In August, Max wrapped himself around Marcus's wrist like an exclamation point, and for a second, money and titles and fear stepped back and let a family breathe. Then came the twist. Most people argue about the progress check. Dr. Colin Mercer, with the clipboard and the calm smile and the eyes that measure, came in and shifted the air from home to lab. I coached the boys, show him happy, show him turn, taking, show him. You are here, and they tried, then saw the evaluation hanging in the room like a noose and turned to stone. Mercer nodded and made a note that might as well have been a shrug, Mr. Hale. Children often mimic gestures during play that doesn't indicate meaningful progress, encouraging, but anecdotal. We must avoid confusing bonding with measurable improvement. False hope can be damaging, and you know that roar in your ears when your own heartbeat is too loud. That was Marcus, and something ugly that wasn't about me but landed on me anyway, boiled up. "This is your doing," he snapped. "You've filled their heads with illusions, parlor tricks. They copy you, but when it counts, they collapse. Do you know what that does to a father who has been promised for years and delivered nothing? And I should have held my tongue, but I didn't. I said, what they have been delivered is structure without safety, charts without love. And yes, I said that to a man who could end me with a phone call, and the house went cold, and I did my job without joy, which is its own kind of failure. And the boys stuck to me like Velcro and kept checking the door like dogs waiting for a storm to decide. 3 evenings later, they found my speaker themselves, dragged it to the middle of the kitchen like smugglers with contraband. Max smacked the power button like he'd been rehearsing. The first thump traveled up through tile and into ankles, and they started stomping. Not well, not together, but undeniably, and they turned toward me and signed our little invention. 2 flat palms, flicking from chest to air, "Dance, please." And I hesitated because hurt still lived new on my tongue. Then I stepped in because I'm not built to deny joy to children. 2 minutes into our stomp circle, Marcus appeared, and the boys saw him and signed again, eyes locked on their dad, like he was the only judge that mattered. "Dance, Dad, and if you've ever watched a man who rehearsed control for years choose to look foolish for love, you know why I cried." He came in slow, then faster, then down on his haunches to be their size, and for the first time in that kitchen, he didn't look like a museum exhibit of a person. He looked like a dad. That night he knocked on my door with an envelope, and I braced for a check and a clause. But it was a letter to Elena. He wrote 2 weeks after she died, never mailed sentences that said, "I don't know how to be enough. I avoid rooms where my sons breathe. I plan my days around not drowning." And when I gave it back, I told him the only thing that felt like water in a dry mouth. "She would be proud of you for staying, not for winning, for staying," and he nodded like a stitch being pulled. Spring came in off the Pacific, and I tied bright scarves to stakes and made a ribbon path in the backyard. Not therapy, a game, walked to the colors, one step, then another. No charts, no applause, and Max tipped like a baby deer, and Leo followed slower, and their laughter had that cold air sound, and Marcus watched from the porch, doing that father math that is pride divided by terror times hope, and halfway down the path, Leo turned and signed, "Come on, Dad." And Marcus didn't walk, he ran all elbows and relief, and he gathered both boys into his arms and cried the good ugly way, and signed love over and over, because sometimes you have to teach your hands what your mouth cannot say yet. Months later, we had a backyard barbecue that was more paper plates than press release neighbors who had waved and wondered, a couple therapists who had the humility to watch something they didn't design. The twins wore capes and signed clumsy greetings and sprinted circles until they collapsed. Laughing and under a maple, Marcus brought me lemonade and said, without ceremony, "You brought them back to me, and me back to them," and I touched his forearm and said, "Then keep showing up," and he almost smiled. For the record, Dr. Mercer emailed later to say the twins' metrics ticked up across several domains, that whatever we were doing seemed supportive, that we should continue, and I didn't print it or frame it. I stuck it in a drawer and packed 2 school lunches, because here's the real question people fight about in the comments. What counts as progress, the thing you can test under fluorescent lights, or the thing that gets a father to dance like an idiot in his own kitchen? Maybe it's both. Maybe the line between professional and personal gets blurry when a house has been starving for love with no title. Maybe I overstepped moving that photo. Maybe the doctor overstepped telling a man to be suspicious of hope. Maybe the mistake was how fast we label kids who don't fit. Charts, you tell me. If this cracked something in you, grief, bias, pride, whatever keeps your hands still. Talk to me, drop your take, argue right and wrong, and tell me what you've seen when judgment meets joy. Hit like. If something shifted, subscribe if you want more stories. Told messy and honest and in the comments. Tell me what counts as progress to you and who gets to decide, because that's the fight worth having.